trying to summarize some of the conversations we've had over the last 2 days. I have a great panel to introduce you to, and then I'm going to join them on the stage. Tonight, we're going to have the pleasure and honor of seeing a film by Mr. Charles Officer called Nurse Fighter Boy. How many people have seen it? Yes, indeed. I mean, just a beautiful, amazing film. Charles's career began studying visual art at Cambridge University and working as a graphic designer. He then became an actor, attending classes at the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York City and performing in numerous stage, film, and television productions. His debut short, When Morning Comes, premiered at the 2000 Toronto International Film Festival to wide acclaim, and then upon the completion of the Director's Lab, he premiered his second film, Short Hymn, Silent War, at TIFF 2002. Where he also received a special jury citation. Fast forward to 2007, the 57th Berlinale Film Festival, which selected his first feature film, Nurse Fighter Boy, to participate in the Sparkling Tales Writers Lab, and the rest, as they say, is history. Charles is currently developing a documentary on Harry Jerome in collaboration with the National Film Board of Canada. Let's welcome Charles Officer. Next to Charles is Thomas Allen Harris, good friend and colleague for many years. Thomas founded Chimpanzee Productions in 1992, dedicated to producing unique visual experiences that embody the search for identity, family, and spirituality. He is also an award-winning filmmaker and cultural warrior. His documentary films, installations, and experimental videos have been featured in venues across the international landscape on television and festivals, museums, and galleries. These include The 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela, Emina Kata, and Through a Lens Darkly, his current work, a 2-hour documentary film exploring the role of photography in shaping the identity, aspirations, and social emergence of African Americans from slavery to the presidents. Please welcome Tom. Miss Kisha Cameron-Dingle, another longtime colleague. She runs the production company Completion Films, which has a first-look deal with Focus Features. She uses her knowledge, passion, and relationships within the world of African cinema to produce films with some of America's most promising young filmmakers through Africa's First Shorts program. Completion Films is currently developing the documentary Semben with filmmakers Samba Gadijo and Jason Silverman, a ghost thriller set in Cape Town directed by Jenna Bass, and the Nigerian gang film Area Boys, directed by, I cannot say her name.
Amelia Nwanguma.
Thank you very much. And written by acclaimed Nigerian playwright Oladipo
Agbuwaje.
Thank you.
Nigerians, baby.
I know. Don't ask Dayo about that. I'm not going to try and mess up his name either. Anyway, we're really thrilled that Kisha could be with us because there is a lot of work happening with the Africa's First Shorts program that we need to make sure that we know about. Please welcome Kisha. Next to Kisha is Dayo. I got to look at his name so I can say it properly. Ogunyemi. How's that?
Good.
Okay, not great, but good. Dayo and I met a couple weeks ago at the African Economic Forum, which was amazing, up at Columbia University. Dayo is the CEO of 234 Media, a firm that makes principal investments in the media, entertainment, and technology sectors in Africa. He is currently launching Cinemart, a pan-continental digital cinema platform targeted at the base of the pyramid consumers that make up 75% of Africa's population. His experience is as an entrepreneur, financier, strategic consultant, and attorney, and he has been honed by 2 decades of advisory and operational experience, including employment with Booz Allen and Hamilton, and Sony Music. He has represented companies, artists, and entrepreneurs in the film, music, and publishing industries in the U.S., Europe, and Africa. When I met Dayo, I said, "You have got to come be part of my panel," and he did. So thank you, Dayo. And last but certainly not least, one of my cohorts in crime in putting this whole conference together. Sean Jacobs. Sean is a faculty member here at the Graduate Program in International Affairs, Milano School. He's a native of Cape Town, South Africa. He holds a PhD in politics from the University of London and MA in political science from Northwestern. He's currently working on a book on the intersection of mass media, globalization, and liberal democracy in a post-apartheid South Africa. He's co-editor of Thabo Mbeki's World, The Politics and Ideology of the South African President, and 2 other books. Most recently, his scholarly articles have appeared in Politique Africaine and Media, Culture, and Society. Please welcome Sean. And now I will join them. So, grab a mic, guys and gals. my one gal over here.
I know.
So I really want this, and Dorothy Thigpen from Third World Newsreel just walks in the door. I'm going to strangle her. Oh, okay, good. Come on in, Dorothy. Good friend and colleague. Third World Newsreel is an amazing distributor. If you don't know about them, they've been around for 40 years. Roseli Torres was also here earlier. I don't know if she's still here. She's still here, too? Okay. So, the idea of this panel was to really try and tie together some of the conversations, conflicts, brainstorming that has gone on throughout the last course of the 2 days. We're going to try and do that as much as possible, as well as to have everyone on the panel talk a little bit about their work and their role in this idea of creating a distribution network that we can call our own. So with that in mind, could I ask each of you just to say a little bit about your work, and we're going to end with Thomas, because Thomas wants to show us a couple of clips on his latest project. Charles.
A little bit about the work.
Yeah. And distribution models.
Distribution models. My experience with distribution has been mixed. I think, you know, just basically even how I got here. I can even just go into that with this particular film you'll see later on if you were around. Nurse Fighter Boy is, you know, I'm very fortunate that a film out of Canada can get an American distributor on board, and that happened to be a company called Film Movement. And it was at a certain time when basically this film was playing through America and stuff, and we had some interest with folks, but it was you know, you spend quite a bit of time making something, and what they're offering is very little. And so we were very fortunate that Film Movement did take the film, and but through that, it was a very interesting ride in terms of how, you know, just connecting with Shadow and Act and Tambe in terms of, you know, without Shadow and Act, I think that Film Movement would have kind of sat on their asses a little bit. And even if you're here, you guys know how I feel.
and even though we're being taped.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. This is nothing that I haven't really said to the folks, because I think the emerging part of being a filmmaker, when it is your first feature film, you do want to understand the process of that end game. And, you know, there is a lot of stuff that kind of happens and they don't want you in the room. So I basically rushed the room, and they had to kick me out at times. They were being polite at first, but I think that there's a community of what I learned through it is that the distributors, you know, they can really use a community. And I think it's a two-pronged thing where basically they can feed each other. But I really believe that, you know, I understand their bottom lines and all this stuff, but then why the hell are you taking the film? If you like something and you're not just trying to take, you know, buy like 10 films this year because I'm going to, you know, think of how to pawn them off to someone else. You're assuming that the distributor is taking your film because they feel something about it. We're very fortunate that on the international level, there was a company called Rezo Films in Paris that picked it up right away. Before we went to TIFF, I mean, when I wrote my first draft of this film, I sent it to Mongrel Media in Toronto, which is the only distributor I wanted to work with and who ended up distributing the film. But during that process, you're developing a marketing plan, you're coming with all these great ideas, and they're saying, yes, that's a great idea. But they won't do it. And this is where this sort of community really steps in. And in Canada, I mean, it's a difficult ride. There are very few people like Francis Anne Solomon, who is, I still feel like being I'll just speak for one thing about, I'm from Toronto, I'm Canadian. I think that you all forget about your brothers and sisters north sometimes. because this is about North America to me. This is about it's beyond that. You remember the Underground Railroad, everybody?
That's right.
Okay, well, Canada was part of that. And I just want to say that the amazing thing is that Francis Anne will bring something like this together in Toronto, but I believe traveling through America, I mean, one of the festivals that's involved with a firm is Seattle, and I had the pleasure of being there, and Jackie Moscow I was just hanging out with her in Toronto last week, or the week before. And there is something in America that I think that we can learn from in Canada in terms of how we reach and we distribute and put things out together. But at the end of the day, I'm not in it to I understand you're emerging, and for anyone who's emerging with their first features and stuff, they're kind of like giveaway projects in a way, because you have to get your thing out there. You have to be realistic with what you're expecting, and I believe that some distributors they all say they like filmmakers to be involved. They like filmmakers. We love you to be involved, and then when you get involved, they're like, wait a minute, you're difficult.
You're too involved.
You're too involved. So I think that I'm still learning this balance of stuff. I have my first feature doc that's coming out, and I've been fortunate that the people that hired me, they already, the National Film Board of Canada, they already have their own internal distribution internationally. But here that is, I'm working with someone in Winnipeg and Los Angeles and Montreal all at the same time, and it's confusing, and they're running off doing things without even consulting a certain grassroots place, and where they will just try to form fit your film into certain places and then tell you that it doesn't work. But if they looked at those ideas that you put on the page for a second, then maybe we can work together. So all I'm just saying is that you can spend your time trying to self-distribute and get in a van and drive from theater to theater and build your connections. But I think it's a project-to-project thing. I don't think every project you can, unless you are Superman or Superwoman, that you can self-distribute. And I think you just, as you're creating your work, you're thinking about how it's going to get at reach people. And I think that trying to ease folks into understanding and being a little more open into that collaboration they talk about, that's my objective. I'm still working on building collaborations with the distributors.
Thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
We're going to skip Thomas and go to you, Kisha.
Hi. I just want to first thank you, Michelle, for having me here and having me between gorgeous men, which is where I think I belong.
I know. How about that? I set that up just for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I feel the love. So I sort of have two lives. I was previously a studio executive. I worked at New Line Cinema and then at Walden Media. And I'm now an independent producer. Even though I have a studio deal, I kind of still feel like an independent producer. And I obviously produce films with mostly, at this point, some young, emerging, but incredibly talented African filmmakers. And the whole point of my deal at Focus was to sort of help them bridge the gap between an American studio and filmmakers in Africa. Because Focus, bless their hearts, wanted to, as a studio that actually wanted to be known for working with the best filmmakers all over the world, recognized that there was a whole big continent somewhere that no one was really working with, and knew that I was sort of there and working with filmmakers on my own. Initially to a lot of derision when I worked at studios. They were like, we know you're black and everything, but the Africa thing is a little too much. And so I never imagined actually that someone would want me there and go, hey, bring some of those people back. But I was very fortunate with James Seamus that he was very excited about the idea of working with some filmmakers from the continent in a real way, not just sort of lip service. But this took a lot of, I think the gap, part of why it existed beyond the obvious, was we knew that the talent was there. That for most people, that's just a gap. They just think there's no one there. And I think it's the same for blacks. They're like, oh, there's no one there, right? But also there was sort of an informational gap. I mean, when I, was in Africa talking to filmmakers about working with Focus, no one really knew what Focus was. Like, Focus is a generic American studio in, Kenya or Nairobi. So, Kenya and Nairobi the same place, sorry. Sorry. In Kenya or Ethiopia. Through this sort of process of understanding where the informational gap on both sides were, I created a program called the Focus Features Africa First Short Film Program, which is now going into its 4th year. And what this program is each year we award 5 filmmakers from Africa $10,000 towards making their short film. They're allowed to go and get additional financing if they so choose. And we select scripts from the filmmakers and bring them as part of the award to New York for a 4-day summit workshop, where obviously they meet Focus, but we also have an amazing advisory board of African programmers, producers, and directors who work with the filmmakers and help them develop their films because they happen to know the sort of unique challenges of making films on the continent. And then throughout the year, the filmmakers go and they make their films, and we've thankfully had tremendous success with the filmmakers. Our first year, to talk about the difference, the first year, the idea was what happens right-wise, I should say, with the films is Focus retains the North American rights to the films. The filmmakers retain their copyright and international rights. So for a studio to only take North American rights to something like that was pretty insane. And it was conscious, because a lot of times, especially with some of the Francophone filmmakers, who work in Europe, a lot of European countries don't ever allow your copyright to be bought. It's considered personal intellectual property, and it's never given away to a company. So the idea that like American people come and they take your movie was sort of a big gap. Like, people were like, well, I don't really know about that. And so that was a very conscious decision to make the deal in a way where it was more approachable for the filmmaker, so it didn't seem like you were giving your life away. And we also wanted to do business. We wanted to get a rights exchange because we wanted to be these patrons of African film, like, oh, you poor filmmakers, you managed to get out of bed, and here's some money because you comb your hair today, and we feel so bad for you. So we wanted it to be business, because that was what we wanted to set up, was that hopefully these filmmakers will eventually come home and we'll, be making features with them. So we wanted to sort of prep the business side of it as well. But initially, literally, we thought, or Focus thought, actually, I knew this would be different, but Focus thought, well, we'll have the films on our website and we'll just screen them there. But the films were so tremendous and did so, we were in Sundance, and The Tunnel was in competition in Berlin, and St. Louis Blues was nominated for a César, and we were in Locarno and Rotterdam. They literally were all over the world, that giving them away for free didn't seem to make any sense anymore. And so now actually the films, our Africa First Volume 1 films, will be available on iTunes on April 26th, which we're very excited about. And they've done a great trailer. It's like Focus behind 4 African shorts, which is kind of crazy. But it looks really great, and we're really proud of the work that but the filmmakers proved it. The thing is, at the end of the day, the work, I think, great filmmaking, excellent filmmaking is a universal language. And so that we've managed to establish some really great relationships with some young African filmmakers. So that's Volume 1. We just had our second round of films screened at the New York African Film Festival on Friday. And they're going to start doing the festival rounds as well. And so, the hope is to, start building those relationships. But I even tell filmmakers, just talking about some of the things that you were saying in terms of even when you're working with an organization, I tell filmmakers regularly, Focus is not the Calvary. This is great, you got your money, but when they're going to festivals, when they're prepping their films for whatever tour they want to take them on, I tell them, bring your marketing materials, do what you need to do, because even though Focus might have a publicist, that publicist may not care about your film. They may be caring about the Anne Hathaway film and promoting that, and you may be this thing that they made them take on the side, because that's just the reality of how it works. So I was like, don't think that, and that the filmmakers, to their credit, have shown up. Literally, CNN called James Seamus for an interview because they were covering Wanuri, not because they were covering Focus. They were like, oh, yeah, so, you're doing this Focus thing? We'll call them. And So, I mean, you know what I mean? So that's the way I tell the filmmakers to do it. Like, you do your own hustle, do your own thing, do your own press, do your own marketing, and let these people catch up with you. You know, let the train catch. And it's the same for the features. I mean, it's the same thing with Jenna Bass, who I'm producing her film Tuktuki. I mean, we created marketing materials for the film. So, like, I'm going to focus going, well, here's how you might want to market this movie if you were to make it. But if you don't make it, that's okay. I've got other people who want to make it anyway, but I'm just letting you know, because you know, like, I don't even wait for focus. You know, you can't wait for any of these I mean, even though I work there and I know them and they all like whatever. You've got to do your own thing. You've got to make it work for you, and you can't. There's no, in this business now, especially with the way things are shrinking and the way the market is changing, you have to think about where your film fits, how to market it, and what to do, and show it to them, prove it to them. I mean, you know, this is. Anyway, that can keep going, but I'll stop now.
Thank you, Kisha. Dayo?
Hi. So 10 years ago, I was here in New York running an entertainment law practice, and I got a call from someone who said, I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm still from Nigeria. I got a call from someone who said, you know, I have this friend who's a big producer in Nigeria, film producer, and, you know, their movies are coming to the US, and, you know, they're being pirated, and we need you to, you know, you do intellectual property law, you know, they need your help. And I did what I did, you know, what I used to do back then, which is, okay, they're filmmakers, you know, have them send me their reel, let me see what their stuff is like. I got a couple of movies sent to me, and they were frankly unwatchable. So I sort of put it by the wayside and never thought about it. About a year later, I was out at Sundance, and you know, some folks came up to me and said, hey, you know, just folks that I'd met, you know, in the different screenings, and said, oh, wait, you're Nigerian, tell us about Nollywood. And I said, what's that? So a year later, a friend calls again and says, you know, there are those guys in Nollywood, and these are the biggest producers, you need to connect with them. And I ended up flying down to Nigeria. Long story short, I realized in short order that the challenges that they were facing weren't really, I mean, there were legal issues, and, you know, everybody, I think many people in the creative industries don't utilize lawyers and business people enough at the right stage. But I realized the challenges weren't really so much on having, you know, the legal representation. It was a structural challenge. And I knew this because I'd moved to New York in the late 80s and had gotten involved as a DJ and then a producer in the hip-hop industry, and I saw many of the same parallels between the film industry in Nigeria and, you know, sort of the hip-hop community in New York and the States. The biggest challenge is simply this. I mean, you know, Nigeria has the second largest film industry by number of commercial releases, not by revenue. So smack dab between India and the US, but 99% of the revenue they were making was coming from selling films on plastic discs. And from my experience in the music industry, you know, sort of know that that's an economic model with a finite, you know, with a finite life. And when we looked at what was going on in India, essentially, India was making, you know, 75% of their revenues from theatrical releases. Now, this is in the context of a country that has, you know, a cinema industry that is almost as old as America's. And what we realized was, you know, there was this paradox where you have a continent with close to 1 billion people, and excluding South Africa, there are fewer than 100 international class cinemas. You know, so it's, you know, I give the numbers, like the US has 37,000 screens for 300 million people. India has 12,000 screens for 100,000 for 1 billion people, and Africa basically had about 100 screens for 800 million people. So one screen for 8 million people. And, you know, that sort of made sense. We've been talking to investors and raising money for finance, and the same story that we've heard over and over again. Well, you know, how are you going to turn it into money? How are you going to monetize it? And we weren't able to say, here are the sales we're going to do, you know, theatrical sales, and here's the DVD window, and here's the free-to-air window. It's just basically DVDs. So we started this project, Cinemart, which is essentially looking to build out digital cinema across the whole of continental Africa, and we're at the same time, you know, looking at doing collaborations with folks we've had conversations with folks in Brazil, both on the content side, but also on, you know, hey, we have movie theaters here, but guess what? In the favelas, people don't, you know, they're the cable systems that people run there, but we've never been able to sort of think about how we get low-cost theaters so people in these communities can actually see the movies that way. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about that in the conversation, so I'll just pass over to Sean now.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle, for inviting me. I think what I should do is just say a little bit about GPA, the program I work for people to, if you're wondering, like, why am I here? I have a political science degree, and I teach international affairs. Well, inside the GPA in the New School is a terminal master's program that are sort of catered to people who don't want to, well, if they want to work like in an NGO, the UN, say like a government back in their home country. In the US, often they work for some US government agency, but the program that I run inside this GPA is called, it's a media program. And the point is not to create filmmakers or media workers. The idea is to create sort of like critical media consumers, and if you want, citizen journalists. So we do run, we have film courses. We have a documentary film course. We have courses on photography. We have courses on how to utilize the internet. But the way we run these courses are not run, say, the way that you'd run it in a film program. It's, you know, run with a sort of different slant. So that is something that if anyone's interested in you know, coming to our program, it's there's a website called GPA Docs, and you can see some of the work produced by our students. It's not sort of, you know, some of it is sort of kind of clunky. Others, because of their background, they've been journalists, they worked in film, so they produce, you know, something more interesting and more artistic, sometimes more lyrical. But it's a vast array of products that you can see on our website. The second thing maybe I should say at the outset is, so I have an academic interest in media. This comes from sort of both specifically to South Africa. I'm interested in the relationship between political change and popular culture. And then secondly, I'm interested in how images of Africans play out in the United States historically. Popular, if you're away from academia, which I should not talk about too much, I also kind of, you know, popularly I'm involved. I'm a critical consumer. I also blog. There's a blog that I started a while back, but it's now a group blog. It's called Africa is a Country, and you can already see where that's going. It kind of makes, it's a sort of quirky take on the way that Africans get represented, not just in US media, but also in European media, and critically, particularly in South African media, because South Africa being, and I want to say, there's two things I think that's important that I want to say. South Africa is very powerful currently in terms of transmitting media images on the African continent, primarily because it controls the major satellite television service on the continent. And I'll say something that I think is important around distribution and exhibition that is not just important for people on the African continent, but perhaps even for people in this audience. But so I run this blog, and then finally I at one point thought I could run a film festival, and we did a film festival here in New York called 10 Years of Freedom. I was telling Thomas when I met him now that actually we showed his a short of his the 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela at the time when he still had a short and he was still trying to make the feature. We included, this was 40 films. We raised about $250,000. I just want to quickly tell you the story. We brought out about 20 filmmakers from South Africa. We partnered with the National Film and Video Commission in South Africa. We partnered with banks, with the South African Airways. This was all, to put it in the local terms, it was hustling. I had the Schomburg Center, I had the the American Museum of Natural History, Tribeca. We had a deal with Tribeca because we told them we had the films and they had to make a deal. I mean, I had no experience of this stuff. So this just goes back to sort of last night when Ava was talking about, I mean, she has lots of experience working as a publicist and marketing, but it's about sort of taking, you know, not so much being against Hollywood, but kind of taking control of the situation and doing these kind of works. And finally, I'm a sort of actively promote, particularly South African film here in New York. I try to get them into film festivals, not through a formal process. I've done this largely informally, getting them into some of the, you know, the kind of recognized film festivals in New York City. And a lot of these films have done well. They've done well inside these film festivals, but not outside, and this is a problem, I think, around distribution exhibition. So the 2 points I want to make, and I hope that I can come back to this later, is this. I think the first thing is we should, I know that people talk here a lot about sort of digital platforms, the firm, I think it's called, from last night, etc. But there is something to be said for, and I know Dayo knows much more about this, and I think the way that the Nigerian distribution model works should really be investigated here. The French government has sent French filmmakers down to Nigeria to go and see what is it about Nollywood that works. I mean, people think that, oh, it's, you know, you're talking about plastic discs. It's called the VCDs, some DVD, but there is a system there, and I think it's working. There's a way to sort of regularize it, you know, in order for people to make proper money out of it. But people need to look at that. The second point I want to make is about there are mainstream platforms out there that are receptive to the kind of films that you are making. Al Jazeera, English. People are not thinking. I have lots of South African filmmakers are emailing me, like, you know, every week saying, I got Al Jazeera's asking. Al Jazeera saw my film. They've now asked me to work on a film for them or edit something for them. Al Jazeera has like dedicated slots, particularly for documentary film. Secondly, Mnet, I mean, this is a much more complicated relationship, but Mnet is becoming Mnet is it's DSTV, it's the equivalent of something like DirecTV, broadcast all over the continent, and in some parts of Southern Europe and the Gulf states. It buys films from, I mean, Dayo knows a lot more about the legal sort of specifics of this, but it makes deals with African filmmakers, and it also is starting an online kind of, you know, like video on demand service that I'm not sure how far that's developed, but that's something that we should also look at. And finally, I was surprised when I was listening to people talking about how to get films out to, you know, communities of color, working class people, people who don't necessarily go to the cinema. Mobile. I mean, I'm not sure how far that discussion is going here, but on the African continent, that's what people are beginning to talk about. I think I saw a stat, well, two things. One is most Africans who are accessing the internet now are not having a computer at home. It's on their cell phone, so it's a different kind of engagement. And so now, shooting low quality, you know, video, shooting these short web episodes, people are beginning to talk about how can you utilize the internet in that way. Yeah, I've seen a report recently that most African Americans, the way that they enter online media is via phones, their mobiles. So there must be a way to think around this. A lot of people are putting stuff online already, and they do it particularly through mobiles. And I'm thinking that that's something that we need to talk about more. Yeah.
Right. We did not have a specific workshop on mobiles this year, but for next time, indeed. And Thomas.
I'm going to show a short clip, but I'm going to talk a little bit, set it up quickly. I am working on a film, a feature of my fourth feature documentary film about, it's called Through a Lens Darkly, and it's about black photographers and really looking at the way African-American photographers and African-American communities have used the camera as a tool for social change from the invention of photography until the present day. And photography was invented 20 some odd years before the Emancipation Proclamation, and which which freed the African American people in bondage, and so that technology could be used as a tool either to support the institution of slavery or to support the abolition of slavery. And with each decade, photographers in African American communities that have dealt with this issue of representation, specifically around, like, you know, being quote unquote a minority in this culture and not having control, or it being very difficult, what this conference is about, to affect the representation and make it much more diverse. And so that's what the film is about. And with each of my films, I've wanted to do like a big outreach project, an outreach campaign, but you know, at the end of the film, I was too exhausted to do that financially, emotionally, you know, and I was ready to move on to the next film. So with this film, I decided to start the outreach campaign even before I started the film, and I've been doing a lot of different panels and workshops all over Europe and Canada, particularly Canada. Sunny Side of the Dock in Montreal did a workshop, and all the European broadcasters were talking about multi-platform. So I came up with this idea of multi-platform, and you know, like as a filmmaker who works primarily in the documentary form, there's like so many hours of footage we shoot, and there's so many things we want to keep in the film that's 90 minutes or an hour, and you know, and at the same time, what the internet is starved for, and what all these platforms are starved for, is content, and we are content rich, and so, you know, and so I've found that, like in the past, when I've given my film up to a broadcaster distributor, it was like, okay, well, we own everything, and we get to control that, and so it clamps down, even psychically clamps down what you can do with your product, you know. Meanwhile, I could be selling my stuff to the Root, or you know, creating exposure for it, and we actually talked with someone about releasing some of the stuff on the Root. And my idea for the film is that within these different modules is the DNA of the film. So I'm open to releasing elements of the film before and getting feedback. So and this might be on a mobile platform, or it might be on the web, and I'll talk about the web project we started. Could you play the first clip? This is a 45, 50-second module featuring one of the photographers, contemporary photographers, Jeannie Ash, and she talks about the connection of spirituality and representation.
We can watch.
And so, so we have like, I don't know, like 500 of these modules. And so right now what we're doing is you know, initially I was just going to start blasting the universe with them, and then I realized that since we're going to be broadcasting next year, that we're creating a strategy for releasing the modules, and it's also connected with another project called Digital Diaspora Family Reunion, which came about out of this project, in tandem with this project. And I could talk about that a little bit later.
Not to talk about it now.
Oh, okay. Well, what happened was, so I thought digital diaspora is like, you know, I learned so much from my grandfather and some from my grandmother. You know, I knew more about my family because I'd be at my grandfather's knee, and I would ask him about all the pictures, all the stories. I knew about his great grandparents, much more than anyone else in our family, and so. And I was also aware that, you know, we have these amazing stories, and my grandfather's a race man, and he had all these books. So I was like going to school and educating my teachers about, you know, Black history and American history. And it just occurred to me as I was making this film about these professional photographers that within our families, you know, we have this gold, G-O-L-D. You know, they're on our mantelplaces, they're in our books, our libraries, they're hidden in boxes, you know, and we're not doing anything with them. You know, we're not valuing them in the way we need to value them. We're not, you know, the worst thing that can happen for me is someone dies and you inherit a box of images and they're your ancestors. You don't know a name, and you don't know the story. And you're just assuming that Aunt so-and-so, Grandpa so-and-so, Grandma whatever is going to be around forever, and you're sitting and watching TV like 7 hours a day, and you don't you're not enriched by our own stories. And so, like, for me, it's like what we talk about in an earlier panel, like, well, when is Hollywood going to shape up or whatever? We need to shape up. You know, these are our stories. And now, especially now, we have this, you know, the internet where we could control and find audiences. People mentioned Tyler Perry. We need, and these stories can, out of these stories, not only a documentary kinds of subject matter comes out, and how we, I'm really interested personally in how our individual stories connect with the public record, because in schools we're taught about, the rich, wealthy, landowning white men, who affect history, but how has history affected us and how our ancestors affected history, and that's what we need to be passing down to our kids. Malidoma Somé talks about, like, they took me out of my home and they wanted me to learn all about their ancestors and forget about my ancestors. And so, for me, I just feel like it's a passion kind of thing. And so we created Digital Diaspora Family Reunion, which is a digital platform which allows people to upload their family stories and family photographs and stories. And then we have a road show that we've been touring. We've been to 5 different cities, including Atlanta, New York, Boston, D.C., and we have people come in and we scan their images and we record their stories and we create modules, and those modules are broadcasted on ddfr.tv. And so you can please go and see. We have cards out on the table. And so that actually came out when the funding for our project was pulled, because we wanted to show the modules, and that was not allowed. And so all of a sudden, doors open for us to create this traveling roadshow.
I wanted Thomas to tell that story. Because I think he and Ann have put together an amazing website, and it's exactly what we're talking about. He didn't get funding for what he thought he wanted to do. He took the concept and did it himself. And this has now led to funding and everything else, and I think these are the kinds of things we've been talking about throughout the course of the 2 days. How can we learn from our own experiences? How can we use our own resources? How can we move these images forward? How can we move our level of distribution forward? So I would like to get the panelists to each now respond to, what would you like to see happen with your work from this point on that has not happened to date? Charles, would you like to start with that?
What would I like to see happen? I think it's a combination of things, but I think ultimately what you want is for the work to travel and to have the opportunity to come to things such as this and to share the work with as many people as possible. And again, it's like, I think that there's this something that exists, there's distributors that exist, and then there's us. We're still left, there's us. And so what I'd like to see is more, I'd like to see this project come to Toronto, number one, and the roadshow come to Toronto. And this is what I'm talking about. It's like, I'd like to see the community expand. I'd like to see that regardless if, all work is looking for an audience, and if you do go through the journey of making something, then I really think that it's up to the individual to kind of expand their community. And we're talking with this, yes, you've got to get funding to make something and so on and so forth, but I love what has just been said about building what you're making before it's coming out and building your audience. And it's very hard, because with this question for me personally, because when you said we got to get together, I got to get my shit together, because I fall into my own traps of falling to this place of you get so obsessive about what you're making or what you're trying to say, and there's so much energy and time going into that, and many of us work, may have a partner or one person, or you're working very singularly. I think it's the fact of expanding the community, and I don't know, because there's so many things. I mean, my head's going crazy, because the digital thing, but the interactive way of just not using the internet to be a place to hold content. I think there's what I haven't been talking about here is like, it's actually, working with the National Film Board, one great thing about that is that they're at the forefront of digital storytelling in a certain way. Like, it's not just trying to make a film and then just post it on a website. It's actually creating interactive work. So I've been working on an interactive project for this documentary, and it's about building the experience, but through that research as well, well is that I also got to understand and learn how much time people actually spend online when they're looking at this interactive stuff, and the level of what story you're trying to tell, and you don't have control over how much time someone's going to spend, tapping through. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to explore, and there's just these sort of things just gives people food to go back into their incubation holes or whatever their communities, and to gather the information and to reach back out. Yeah, I would just love to see the work travel more and get into more. I don't even think it's theaters, because I really honestly believe now that, like, for theatrical releases and stuff, it's like, I really believe that it's like an event. To have your film actually stay in the theater for 3 weeks, a film of a certain size is huge, and that's very difficult. So I think that, and we come from a culture where we have, the people that we use for music in our films. Like, I want to see, I'm trying to distribute the next film at concerts, like with the musicians that actually worked on the film, because I don't know if you've ever been to shows and you see, 75,000 people, how many people go to a merch table, and by how much they're making, like 50 grand a show on selling T-shirts. Imagine if your film is there, that's endorsed by the art. Like, there's other ways to get your stuff out, and I don't think that we should all think theatrically. I mean, we're not, because all the discussions have shown that we're not. But I think there's so much we can do, and I think that it's not, and I don't think it's Hollywood versus independent. I think, I think Bollywood, people survive, and going to in Finland, and how they have their own, they got people going to their own thing, and it's because they somehow really build a level of community, and they're telling stories that Hollywood still doesn't take every finished film. You know what I'm saying? So, and people are going in Finland. I mean, so there's all these things that contradict each other. So I really think that if you're going to work from your soul, I don't think you should really think about taking that project to Hollywood per se. If you're going to work from your soul and connect with real people in a certain way, I think there's that stream, and then I think it's so free. What I'm trying to say is that the world is ours in a certain way. I don't feel like we're restricting ourselves by trying to compare and contrast and be something else. And so I think your story, your film, the project that you're working on is a specific entity, and thinking of that life. So I don't know if that's...
Charles, you just, in a nutshell, said why I thought this was important, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas, can we skip you and go to Kisha again?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think a few different things, I guess. I mean, I think there's something, and I think that's why we're talking. There's something, obviously, that's very exciting about this time. And even as these media companies have become more consolidated, there's sort of there's becoming an end to the hegemony. I mean, because you can reach your audience without having to go through this huge machine anymore. I mean, I'm doing a film that Wanderi Kahiu is directing, which is based on a book called Who Fears Death. And literally, Wanderi has not written one page of the script yet. We have about like 400 people on Facebook who are like friends of the film, and I don't even know how this happened. But Nettie, the author of the book, she's like an avid social media like whore, and she's managed to, I say that in a good way, and she's managed to, like, with her network already, people are like, I can't wait for the film. And so we put things, we put little things on the page, and then we find other people who want to help us make the movie. And it's crazy now. So the good news is that, you don't have to wait for anyone anymore. Because there's something funny about, listen, we've been talking about Hollywood and mainstream and all of this stuff. The funny thing about Hollywood, or people in Hollywood, is that they're rich. Right? It's true. It's true. There's a funny thing about rich people. There's two things about rich people. One, they're lazy. Right? I hope to be very, very lazy one day. Very, very, very lazy. No, they're lazy because you know, they can be. I used to say to people when I worked at New Line, people would call me up like, yo, Kisha, I got the script. You got to give it to your bosses. It's urgent. They need to do it today. And I was like, you don't understand. These are people who are hunting on full stomachs. And you have a very different attitude about food when you're not that hungry. Right? So it's like this. These are people, I can eat. Maybe, maybe not. So that's just the mentality you're dealing with. That's kind of Hollywood. And two, they're scared of not being rich anymore, right? They're terrified that one day someone's going to take all their money. But these are both opportunities in a very funny way, because you can go and create something, and if you make something and it's hot and people love it, they're like, we'll just buy what you have. And then we can stay rich, yes. You know, because first they'll be afraid of it, like, what is that? We don't know what that is, and oh my God, it's terrifying. So these guys are like sweating at night right now. You don't understand. Like there's not a studio chief head that is not up at night going, holy shit, what are we gonna do? Like, what are we gonna do? Like, there's no more DVDs. Like, their whole market, the whole business plan, like everyone knows this, but no one says this out loud. The entire freaking business plan of Hollywood is dead.
Music is
Hello? It's dead, okay? They are just as scared as you are right now. They're terrified. But this is great, because if we can figure out, hey, like if we figure out how to make money making our movies, they'll be like, oh.
Which is exactly what happened in the blaxploitation era, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, listen. So these things create opportunities. And if you're smart enough, and that's all Tyler Perry did. I mean, like, he did his own thing. You know, he worked his own audience, and they just said, okay, we'll just buy that. Cool. Mm-hmm. And you go now, and he has to do every black movie ever because they're too lazy to figure it out, so they just make Tyler Perry do it now. So, am I not surprising you, right? So it's listen, if you're willing to do the work and bust your ass, because that's really what it boils down to. You gotta wake up in the morning and you gotta bust your ass. No one's gonna give it to you. No one's gonna feel bad for you. They're rich, they're lazy, okay? They're not thinking about you. They're not worried about you. But if you show them, hey, I can make money. I know what I'm doing. I know where my audience is. I know how to get to them. I know how to make good movies. I know how to get it out there. The second you don't need them, that's when I'm going to call. Mm-hmm. This is the same for anything else. The second you're like, I got this. I know what I'm doing. They'll be like, hey, how you doing? Hey, we'd love for you to come in and meet with us and tell us what you do and tell us how it works. And so it's just like anything else. I mean, and that's the secret. There's no secret. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you? The way you get in is to not need to get in. Mm-hmm. Right?
Thank you, Kisha. Dayo.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything she said. No, I mean, I'll just add a little bit to that. I don't know how many people were in the plenary, but just to add to what Kisha said, I know filmmakers want to make movies that connect with communities, and those communities are not just necessarily black communities, but there's no question that communities of color form the base. I mean, that's the whole market. That's what everything else gets built upon. And Francis Ann was talking earlier about the fact that there's the Caribbean here. Charles was talking about don't forget Canada. And all I'd add to that is there are 40 million black folks in North America and the Caribbean. If you add South America, it's probably another 30 to 50 million, depending on how you define it. And there's 800 million people in Africa. Okay, I mean, you want to talk about doing the math? Yeah. Do the math.
I don't know how you're going to top that, Sean, but go for it.
I was actually sitting here saying, I don't know what to say. I mean, I'll have just a quick short comment to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that one can say about the last 2 days that I think has been useful and interesting about, how you have, if you're thinking marketing, you're thinking community. So you're not just that you close, sort of blindly, you targeting. But I think the thing that sort of stuck with me is, like Dayo mentioned, in his bio, you said that he was thinking about the digital platform. Video on demand is currently my sort of little bugbear, which is like every time I'm looking for a movie and Netflix doesn't have it, or it's not on television, then I'm like, why isn't that filmmaker putting that film? I know you don't want to put the whole film on the internet, but you can put it on a video on demand service that I'll pay. I want to watch it. I'll pay my, the rental fee, the $5 or whatever. And I think that's maybe something that also should be thought about. Yeah.
Well, we talked about that in the workshop that I was moderating, and there are some issues with video on demand that we have to sort of figure out how to circumvent. But I do think that it's a long-term model. Also, it's not an immediate return on your your creativity. Do you want to add something to that, John?
No.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Oh, Thomas, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say that I had an educational distributor. I have an educational distributor, and it was like 5 years, and they offered me a nice fat check, and basically my film 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela has been tied up in terms of home video for the last 5 years. No VOD, no Netflix. I mean, and I'm like, my God, that was an expensive check. And I just have to say that, I mean, I would never sign that deal right now, and and you don't know like where things are going. And it's so important to keep your rights, and because you just don't know. Month by month, things are shifting and changing. Absolutely. And can I show my last clip? Yes. So I have this last clip. I'm creating something. It's probably going to be a kind of a TV show, and a digital diaspora family reunion. And I'm just going to show just a short clip of the highlights. We did a big road show in the Harlem stage, and it used to be that, like, in between films, I would die. No one would see me, no one would hear me. You never see it. And with this digital diaspora, we got to review a big profile in the New York Times, in the front page of the art section. New York won. I mean, it's just doing this event. And so, so I just want to show you a little bit about what we came up with, and also just have a second right after to talk about how we could work together in terms of people who are doing documentary or documentary parts of narrative films.
Awesome. And then we go to the audience.
Yard and to understand that those family member spirits are right there it just knocked me out. I'm telling the world this, but I haven't told all my family members. But my mother, as you point out from these photographs, was interested in being stylish.
My gosh, look how glamorous she was.
Yes.
Growing up in home, we were pretty much a, black working class family. We didn't have a lot, but at least both of my parents was there. And, I look back and I'm just really grateful, that I could say that was my reality.
It's not often that we see images of families, especially African American families. Did you bring in pictures of your daughter?
On my phone, yes.
Oh. I love that.
So many of our photographs, pictures, and other things have gotten lost. And I happen to be blessed to have so much. So I thought it was important to share. I don't know the particular occasion. However, I'm almost 100% certain that they were taken by my great-grandfather's great-nephew, whose name is Robert E. Williams.
I'm in Washington, D.C. with my other mentor, Percy Sutton. This giant of a man accepting me to partner with him was really very, very special.
time, I didn't tell you the hidden parts, that my mother met my father because she took music lessons at where my grandmother's music school in Harlem. Wow. Isn't that sweet? My mother did what's known in that time, she married out of her group, because you had a Bayesian grandmother and a Southern, and it was like all in one. This is a picture of my dad, Ben L. Cochran, and this is a photo he sent back to my grandmother from World War II, and it says, "With love to my mother, Billy." As most soldiers did, the first picture did go to their mother, even though they had loved ones at home. I'm very proud of this distinguished picture.
And I always thought that picture that I had was my grandfather and grandmother. And then someone said, no, that's your grandmother and her brother. And then they told the story why. This is a picture of my father and mother. And if you notice in the pictures, there's always a different car. My father was a mechanic. And he worked for rich white people who had garages. And they didn't trade cars in, they'd give them to the mechanic. And so he always had 2 or 3 cars around the yard.
I brought my mom because she's the one who holds a lot of the stories right now, and that's the one thing that I'm really feeling the urgency to make sure I do get all the stories that are into mine and my sister's heads, and then to help her connect the dots of the gaps that are missing, as she is the last one on the greater side of the family that can talk to any of this.
Well, they've been through a lot, from making it from Guyana to the United States, but we've also moved a lot. I have not been back to Guyana since I left in '95, and so this is my only connection really to that place. But I've been the one that has taken on the role of really keeping them and collecting them and keeping them safe.
As we share our stories, we see the similarities, and it is creating kind of a diaspora community because it's uniting.
Brilliant. So I just wanted to say that, folks who are working with other blogs, we'd love to.
With you, Michelle, over the years, this is a topic dear to both of our hearts. And going back to Daughters of the Dust and certainly Sankofa, having that blessing working together with you. One thing that comes up oftentimes and that I see absence in me working both in theater and film, and we sit down and we talking, even in the social networking workshop, I never heard mention the African American church, African American or religious institutions, and how they play a critical part in our cultural evolution globally. It's always left out. It's like, the black church don't exist almost, or the mosque, or the African Americans who are in the Jewish religion. All these religious institutions have open-minded representatives as imams or rabbis or ministers who know the marriage between culture and religion, the sister and brother. So I don't know, I wasn't at every workshop, I came a little late, but was that ever put on the table? The importance that we cannot leave out our religious institutions, going interdenominational, beyond Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, or whatever, but to open-minded people who know the importance of culture in human character evolution. Any of you?
Well, anybody wants to respond to that? What I would say is, you're absolutely right, Coach. We haven't really talked about it because most of the conversations have been around the use of technology and how that can push us forward. But I do think that some of those models that we established doing Daughters and Sankofa still have very relevant basis in wherever we go forward with distribution models, because we do have to rely on our cultural institutions, including religious institutions. So you're absolutely right. We shouldn't forget them.
In Canada, I mean, for me, in Toronto, it's one of the first places that I actually is on my grassroots sort of outreach list. I'm not. I mean, I grew up in certain places, so, and I have a connection with about 4 different churches. So there's definitely that. That's as much as I can say on it, because it's kind of it's a great idea, because I haven't really thought of actually, you know, the same sort of reaching out in Montreal or Vancouver or other places. It's still quite insular, but it is on the list. It is on my grassroots list that I hit up. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately think of Tyler Perry, and that's like his bedrock, right? So, you know, and it's, I don't know why it's not like, well, you know, I'm doing a film right now. I'm premiering in 2 weeks, and Bennett produced Marriage Equality, Byron Rushing and the Fight for Fairness. It's about same-sex marriage and about this deeply religious straight civil rights hero who pushed through marriage equality in Massachusetts, Byron Rushing, and we're actually reaching out to churches around that, you know, and I think it's really, you know, I think for me, there's been like a kind of it's been like a little bit of a hiccup or step, because, you know, as a openly same-gender loving, you know, man who, you know, also uses, like, you know, pushes boundaries in his work, you know, there's always a feeling like, well, am I going to be accepted in this church, you know, and like, you know, so, and which is interesting now, because the whole marriage debate that's coming up, because it's open, it's like, well, our relationships are legitimate, and we don't have to, like, you know, like Marlon Riggs said, we don't have to keep our tongues tied. You know, I think it's an opportunity to, like, you know, to move the whole everything forward. You know, I mean, in the age of, you know, AIDS and HIV, you know, for the African American church not to, like, really be talking about sex and really step into the 21st century as leaders in this, you know, is something that, you know, it's like I'm grappling with that, and so we'll see. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a Muslim woman on the panel, in addition to Russell Simmons, in the April 26th screening. So.
No, I mean, I think, again, it's important. I think it's something to put in the consciousness of filmmakers, you know, as you're making work. I never forget when the weekend numbers for Women That Are Loose came out. I was in, like, you know, the Monday conference room, and they were all going through the numbers, and it was like, who's DJ Jakes? You know what I mean? And I was like, oh God. And so, so it's there for people who are smarter, because I remember being at Women That Are Loose in Atlanta or wherever it was, and he played that trailer, and I was like, that's about to be the biggest movie ever happened. So, you know, it's for people who are smart enough to, like, figure out how to access that market and make money, because, again, once you make the money, everyone goes, oh, well, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. So it's there, you know what I mean? And it's for filmmakers to think about as you make the, you know, I mean, because certainly the Christian market in general has certainly, you know, I mean, within that, of course, there's a black church, but I think there is a recognition now that there is sort of a Christian market. So, and I mean, T.D. Jakes has a deal at Sony. He has a movie coming out, I think, in the summer. Yeah. So, you know, the market's there, and for people who are, you know, figure out how to access it, it's there.
Other questions? No? No? No?
This one.
I guess I'll just...
Tom Bay, right here.
It's not really a question.
Comment?
It's not a question, but I wanted to say I've never met Sean Jacobs, but I read your blog all the time, and I link to it constantly, and I love it. Africans and Countries is a great blog. Read it. That's all.
Thank you.
It's very informative, and I mean yes.
He's a blogger.
Yes, indeed. We should definitely have a bloggers workshop next time as well, which Tembe, you can head up for us. Yes, Adam.
Charles, you briefly mentioned the idea of using the website interactively.
Yes.
And I know for most of us as filmmakers, we make things because we need to tell a story, and we want people to see it. And the past model was you make a feature or you make a short. And with the web, I think it's much more flexible. But what were some of what was the nature of some of the interactivity that you were going to use? If you can give away your secrets.
Well, one of them I'm still working on it, but it was like the whole development stage of really getting into understanding how you can use this interactively, because, you know, It's not just a picture book, and it's just not a flip through with screens. It's actually, I mean, for this particular thing, because there's a track star and stuff, there's actually there are actually tests for you to do, for you to go out. There's a way that you can actually go out and record your times, come back to this. So it's not that you would just use this and disappear. You come back and use it, and then and through that experience, you still experience. The through line for him was how he overcame a specific injury, and coming from the athletic background of sort of what that takes and that sort of drive for someone who actually wants to even just is in their 60s and wants to understand how fast they'd have to run per stage to do 60 meters. And so you can actually put yourself in and actually do it, because you can watch something and you can kind of take it in and say, wow, that's pretty amazing. He did the 100-meter sprint in 10 seconds. Wow. And then there's some young athletes that are coming up that are actually really inspired and will actually use this site to actually clock and gauge their progress. But through that, there are sections where they actually get to go into and actually get other aspects of the story, because it's amazing when you go out and you shoot a documentary or a film and you have this content and you don't know what to do with some of this stuff, and some of this stuff is so great. And so what the National Film Board was doing, and it was very, very new, there was this film made, if you go to nfb.com, they have an interactive thing.
.ca, right?
.ca,
yeah.
But they have .com as well too, I think. It's horrible. Don't quote me on that. But there was a film called Water Life that was made. And if you go and you go through this, you can spend so much time there, and it's beautifully designed. It's the fusion. I come from a design background. I was a creative director and designer before I made films. So, there's the way that design is used, typography, moving images. It's everything. But it's not just sitting there and watching something straight through. What I'm trying to say is just that there's so much to explore in that. Like, for the film that I'm working on right now, I'm doing something where it's not a choose your own adventure, but it's actually for the experience that the subject has gone through. You're going to be put in certain situations where you're going to have to decide, and it's going to take you. So you can understand. I'm trying to see how when you're sitting like in front of a computer, it's like, how do you actually make that person not just sit there and click away, but actually feel like they are in it. And also with the Jerome story, which is about track and field, it's like I've always imagined, even when I designed the sets where I constructed my interviews, I created art gallery settings. So from the construction of the film, interactivity to me is this, really. This is interactive to me. It's not sitting alone in a room and clicking away. So, but there's ways to initially engage somebody first, and then hopefully there's an event. Because I still think, again, I'll go back to theatrical stuff. It's like an event. That first week, or for that, it's a week-long event, and if you have anything more than that, that's gravy, because the real life of the film, or in that traditional sense, happens in VOD, happens in DVD, happens in the other exchanges. Like theatrical life is short. But with the interactive quality of it is that if you can construct something where you're going to have someone participate, go off and do something in their real life, then come back to the thing, that to me is giving them reasons to come back, or otherwise they're spending 30 seconds. We went through a whole thing where we were able to gauge across the globe how much time people are spending actually on these sites, the top sites. So, and the average time was in America was about, I think it was a minute and 10-15 seconds. How much can you take in a minute and 15 seconds? And especially if you've worked and you have this whole experience that you want people to engage in. So there's research to be done, and to really not think that interactive is just this answer. It's really specific, but I think it's also the evolution of, like, from radio to television. Before, and when television began, it was like people just doing the radio plays on television, standing there doing it like this. And then they thought, wow, we can actually shoot in other places and create scenes and create a mystery, or do a horror, and then it evolves. So I think it's so early in a certain way that it's untapped. And I think that, you can really use the interactive medium to tell your film, your story, because I think we talk about filmmaking and stuff, but I think we're storytellers, right?
Absolutely.
And these, and again, we've heard it before. Reggie said it. I was just in his workshop. Yeah, it's like these are paintbrushes. These are different things in our arsenals, like the computer or the interactive thing. It's a medium. It doesn't do it by itself. So it's like, how do these stories? So now when I'm writing now, it's really funny because when I'm writing now, I don't know if it's actually a film yet. I know this is a story that I want to write because I don't write like in a novel way. I still write in a scriptish sort of way. So, but I still don't know if it's going to be what form is it going to come out in. And I think and I come from theater as well, and I want to mix and fuse that the film and the play could be going on at the same time. And but the interactive thing is so new. I think if you go to this site, your mind will open up to the possibilities. Yeah, it really will be.
Yes, right here. And then Reggie. And then we're going to wrap up.
I'd like to hear a little bit more from Dayo regarding what's going on legally, as far as, you know, the work that you've done or what you've learned regarding film in Nigeria or on the continent in terms of rights, in terms of how people are distributing, in terms of what they're thinking and what strategies are coming up and need to be used.
Sure, and I'm sure that Kisha will have some idea, at least on the continent, of what things are looking like. What's going on legally? Nothing. The folks in Nollywood are not particularly interested in contracts, and that's not the way they do business. They're very focused on monetizing stuff. Now that has led to some problems. I mean, I always tell people 7-8 years ago, the economic shelf life of a Nollywood movie was 6 months maybe. And what that meant is, you know, an industry that's putting out 2,000 movies a year, there's no catalog, and that you know, those movies that are made over time don't generate more money to sustain the movie making process. Having said that, you know, a lot has changed since then. Not entirely, you know, for the good. I mean, and that's, if there's one takeaway, and Thomas, you know, had hinted at that. I think Shola Lynch, who was in the theatrical and film festival, had hinted at that. Not every opportunity that comes out is ultimately going to be a good opportunity from a financial standpoint for the filmmaker. And I think this goes back to the question, you know, one of the questions during the plenary is, how do we define success? And I think there's the creative component, right? You know, how do you channel this creative energy to create a compelling story? There's a cultural impact that those stories have when your creative efforts connect with a community, connect with an audience. But then there's also the commercial impact. And I think that commercial impact is what ends up closing the cycle and giving people the ability to go back and tell new stories. So Sean had mentioned earlier that, you know, there's DSTV and Mnet has opened new markets, and it has, you know, but a lot of those Mnet contracts are, you know, people paying peanuts in some cases to take all rights. Theatrical, which they can't even exploit it because they're not theaters. Free to air, pay TV, online, the whole thing. You know, so in some ways, there are lots of things that are developing on the continent, and it's not just the continent. I mean, you see, I mean, from the conversations we're having, it's universal. New markets are opening up, but people are not always clear on what rights they're giving away and what future markets that forecloses. Right here on the panel, I mean, the story he told speaks precisely to that. People think that what they're purchasing is a 90-minute documentary when really what the filmmaker wants to create, or what the storyteller wants to create, and what the community wants to hear are stories. in whatever form, in whatever length, in whatever medium. So I don't know if I, really spoke. I can't answer that question because it's just not as structured an environment as Hollywood is, but I think that in itself creates new opportunities if people are a little bit careful about the way they taking care of the business side of things as well.
Reggie.
Oh, I don't need a mic.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
We're recording. Even you.
Oh, right. All right. No, I just wanted to say that this has been very awesome. And especially last night when Ava D spoke of this Affirm initiative, distributing films within the sort of collective of communities. The people that are in Affirm are well established. They're very, very well established in what they do and in the industry, albeit they're independent. So what infrastructure is there available to just these satellites of organizations that basically are not connected? I mean, I've been sort of editing or working in television for 20 years, and I still see that, like, Third World Newsreel is over here, Black Public Media is over here, New School's here. We're still very separate. And what are some things that we can do to be connected in a new way besides Facebook? We're here at an interactive sort of conference, but what is in play to sort of bring us together and keep the conversation going till next year? Does that make sense?
Good question. Yeah. And I would love for some of the people in the audience who are with some of the organizations that Reggie just mentioned to respond as well as the panelists. Dorothy, would you like to add anything?
Well,
can you get a mic right here? Thanks.
Actually, in the last workshop, we talked about this. And with the advent of social media, whatever, there has to be more collaboration. My question that started the conversation in the last workshop was, everyone it feels like the filmmakers are doing, some filmmakers and media artists are doing very well with their autonomous identities and cyber identities, etc. And it's a constant lesson to learn. How can an organization such as Third World Newsreel enhance what they're doing, and what Reggie was saying, collaborate and bring it together, because that will empower us even more, I feel. I mean, that I'm asking a question, he asked a question, but I really don't have the answer to that.
Anne? Can you get a microphone? Quick. Here she goes. Here comes Tia. Thanks, Tia.
Hi, I work with Thomas Allen Harris on the digital diaspora, and we, to answer Reggie's questions and Dorothy's comment, one thing that we're trying is to really make use of our partnerships. Partnerships with like-minded issue organizations, NGOs, nonprofits, educational organizations, and also for our new upcoming project, we decided to experiment with just partnering with other media and social organizations. So for our marriage equality screening on April 26th, we reached out to about a dozen nonprofits, media arts organizations, and said, well, listen, why don't we cross-promote? Why don't we, get together? We'll put this on our site. We'll put, your links on your site. And so we're just going to try out to see how we can really highlight each other, for a special event for us, but then sort of make sure that we start the relationship so that we can reciprocate in the future. So I think as far as building those bonds, and sort of building our brands, but also building our network brands, I think it's something where we just have to try it out, see what works, and really, leave it to our audiences to see how they respond, make use of those Google metrics, and then we can really see, what works for us now and what we can try in the future.
Thank you, Anne. Trudy?
And can I add that I also think organizations like Third World
can reach out to other people and try to formulate some mentor-mentee relationships, because I know as an independent filmmaker, I rarely work with any organizations. And generally, I'm part of NIWIF, but I'm not. I tend to reach out to young people, young producers more than reach out to organizations where they have more resources than I do. So they can reach out to someone who has, a social network. They could be a young filmmaker, but they might have 20,000 people. And both of them, it could be win-win for them to kind of learn some back-end stuff or learn. There's a lot of learning that can be involved if there's some sort of partnership, mentorship thing going on.
Yeah, this is really good. I mean, it's the whole conversation is needed, and it's real strong. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing so much of this now, I mean, and it's so informal in a certain way, because I see Michelle here, and then I'll see her at the African Film Festival, and then I'll see the African Film Festival is dealing with the Maisels Institute, and then I'll see cross-fertilizations between all these people that we know in certain circles, and that's who's up there. And I see university contacts, and then like Third World Newsreel and Sarah Lawrence, I mean, doing things that necessarily think of it as institutionalized, but when they do it, it's working, you know what I mean? And I feel like it's good. I mean, and to now think about it and hear Ann talk about it, and to hear Kojo talk about the church part of it. Putting it and making it institutionalized is just a step in that process, but it's already sort of happening because people know within these institutions what they have to do, and they know each other, you know what I mean? And they're cooperating, and it's working, I'm there with my hand, I'm there with Michelle, I'm there with Dorothy, because we're all doing the same thing. And so I think it's just that one extra thing, to institutionalize. And then it becomes outside of the culture. Then you start to, because see, Michelle knows all these other people too, you see? And so, it stretches further. And then suddenly it becomes institutionalized, and I think we're right there. But I mean, it's just interesting. I never even thought of it until I'm hearing it. And it's great. And I think, we just have to embrace it, I guess, I think. I'm just adding that.
Well, I could tell you that this would never have happened without partnerships and collaborations across all of the people in this room, and as well as on the stage. And it is something that we do it. You're absolutely right. I think we can always do it better, and I do think that we're learning that nothing's going to happen unless we do it together. And perhaps we can continue the conversations that have started here. We do have, I hate to say, Facebook page for the conference, but that's definitely a place where we can continue the dialogue. I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to have to break because I have to have a potty break, and then we have to start Charles's film. So, but this has been an amazing dialogue, Dwayne.
Yes, it's been an amazing conference, really a lot of food for thought. Just to address a little bit of the last comment about how do we network and sort of stay together, one idea could possibly be to just do an out-of-the-box bulletin board PHP program. So anybody could log into it, join as a member, post a topic, and people could chime in on that topic in any way, shape, or form, post their projects. Also, the value of being viral is really important. Passing information along in any respect. Just sending on a link, on your Facebook page, Twitter, and then, of course, as a community, also putting the dollars. When we see something, that we really like, say we really like it, we're going to support it. Even if it's just a few dollars here or there, is also important.
Very important. Last comment, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that, really supporting the institutions as well. Like, Angel Brown has a new magazine out, Cinematic. On her site, and that's like $38 a year. And I let my Harlem
Arts Alliance.
Harlem Arts Alliance. I need to join the Harlem Arts Alliance, and I've been saying I was going to do that for the last month and a half, but I'm going to do that, and also Studio Museum of Harlem, and different places. I don't know if ways to support Third World Newsreel, I mean, there's always like a donate page. So like if organizations doing stuff that you like, that we, $25, we don't have to wait for Kickstarter, that we could, put some money where, to these organizations and these efforts, these institutions.
Absolutely. I really have to break now, but we're not going anywhere. We're just going to stay right in this room. I want to really thank this amazing panel we had. Thank you guys so much.